G'day and welcome back to the channel, Ginger Ninja's Movie Reviews. I am the Ginger Ninja and these are my Franchise Friday movie reviews. If you're new to my channel, thank you very much for tuning in, stopping by and checking it out. We are up to the very last film in the Insidious franchise so far with Insidious, The Red Door. Now this one came out in 2023, so let's get straight into this one because I'm looking forward to wrapping up this franchise and moving on to a new one soon. Anyway, the film was directed by Patrickwilson and it stars tysimpkins, Patrickwilson, sinclairdaniel, rosebyrne, leighwhannell, Angus Sampson, and linsaye. Although those last four names are more cameos than anything else. But the plot. The Lamberts must go deeper into the further than ever before to put their demons to rest once and for all. Which I kind of thought they already did that in the second one, but hey, here we are. So, when you've been haunted for over a decade, sometimes the scariest door to open is the one you've kept locked inside yourself. And that's the setup for Insidious, The Red Door, a film that finally tries to close the book on the Lambert family once and for all. But does it slam that door shut or does it creak closed very slowly? Well, look, I'll be honest, this was a second time watch for me. I watched this when it first came out, being a fan of the franchise overall. But to be honest, the first time I watched this, I wasn't thrilled at this one. But looking at the film with a different mindset, going into it, looking at it, constructively, have my views mellowed? Have they changed? Well, let's find out. So straight off the cast, and we've got Patrickwilson returning, but this time in both front of the camera and behind as its director. And honestly, his performance as Josh Lambert, it's solid. It always is. He is a great actor, a very underappreciated actor. Again, like he could do so much more. But in this, he does play a father who's weighed down by guilt and trauma, and his dynamic with tysimpkins, who's returning again as Dalton, who's now going off to college, it gives the film its more stronger emotional moments. And like I mentioned, tysimpkins returning in the role as Dalton, he really steps up and handles that emotional weight of the role with a very nuanced performance. Watching Dalton and Josh struggle to reconnect while both literally and figuratively being haunted adds a welcome layer of depth. Now, I did mention Rosebyrne. Again, she returns as Renee, but her role is nothing more than a cameo than a true presence, which is a bit of a letdown given how central she was in the earlier films. Sinclairdaniel is introduced as Dalton's college roommate, Chris, and in all honesty, her performance was rather subpar given the rest of the cast. Her character came off as one-dimensional and most times annoying. The rest, including linsaye, Angus Sampson, leighwhannell, they're nothing more than cameos, tying the film back to its origins. It's nothing more, nothing less. Moving on to the directing and the writing, and this is Patrickwilson's first time in the director's chair, and I think he did pretty well visually. Like, the film has some of the best laid out shots in the series. The MRI scene, it plays with this limited point of view and it really does ramp up the tension. It's handled really well for both him being in front and behind the camera.
Just let me out. Let me out, let me out, let me out. Dr. Brower. Let me out.
Now, that being said, he does lack somewhat of a stylistic flair that was staples from the earlier films in the franchise from James Wan and leighwhannell, the first two and the third film. Wilson's direction is competent and it's technically sound, though it's not especially innovative and it really didn't break the mold in any way. He clearly cares about the material and he tries to ground the horror in family drama, which is what worked in the first two films, and here it works in parts. But unfortunately, the pacing is uneven and many of the scares feel overly familiar, and he seems to lean heavily into jump scares as opposed to building up the tension overall to that scare. And look, there are a few that are effective in this, but the majority are just predictable. And this echoes tricks we've seen in earlier films. Compared to James Wan's razor sharp control of tension in the original, the Red Door, it feels more cautious than daring. And that could come to him being a first-time director. Now, the writing, it leans strongly into the emotional baggage of the father and son estrangement and coping after hitting a supernatural wall, so to speak. This is a more introspective approach, and it is fitting as an emotional conclusion to the Lambert arc. But overall, the film trades frights for therapy, making the writing feel thin, sentimental, and at times too introspective to really deliver that adrenaline horror that fans expect. There is a sense of mythology that is maintained through this. We've got the Red Door, which you can see behind me. That's been a big theme in even the last key, the fourth film, the first two films, of course. But a lot of the mythology is sidelined in favor of some underwhelming emotional beats. Now onto the effects. So there are some definite highlights here. Creative scenes like the vomiting college student and the MRI sequence look great, and the sound design in these are spot on. There is definitely a notable visual style in these elements. The red and black palette, the oppressive sound design, they all return, keeping that dreamlike horror atmosphere alive. But while it looks polished, it doesn't really push the visual envelope any further than any previous installments. It's effective, but it's safe. And then there's the lipstick face demon here. Again, looks good for the most part, but there is one scene where the demon screams and its mouth does that whole CGI extended jaw thing that's become a very standard trope in horror films. Like you look at that Russell Crowe where he's an exorcist, the Pope's exorcist, I think it was. There's a scene in that, his jaw just extends. Abigail's another one, although that's a vampire, so it kind of makes sense. But seriously, like the CGI in these ones, they look terrible. Like honestly, can someone explain to me why they are doing this? It seems more common now than ever. The jaw extending, hyper extending, whatever. Anyway, it just felt out of place. The lipstick face demon we saw in the first film looked great. It was tense. It was scary. We don't need that. It really does take you out of the moment. It's a disappointing sequence in an otherwise fairly good display of effects work. Rewatchability. This is the second time I've watched this, so I can't say that I wouldn't rewatch it, but in all honesty, I probably won't rush out to rewatch it again anytime soon. And if I do, it would still be the last one in the series. Like I said, I think if I were to rewatch these ones, I would go 3, 4, 1, 2, 5. Final verdict. Insidious the Red Door feels like the franchise doing therapy instead of slamming the door on ghosts. If you're cool with slower storytelling, emotional stories, and some genuinely effective set pieces, there is a lot to appreciate in this one. But if you're craving tight, dread-fueled horror of James Wan's original films, this one might feel like a bit of a letdown. Overall, for a score, Insidious, The Red Door, gets a 6 out of 10. There you have it. That is the Insidious franchise done and dusted. Overall, this has been a fairly good franchise. Like, the movies themselves are solid. They've got great casts, they've got good effects, the directing is generally really good. The writing is, again, really good. There are a few hits and misses in a few certain parts to it, but overall, like, this is a solid franchise. It really works well. So yeah, definitely recommend you check them out. Even if you watch my review, you're not a fan of these films, that's up to you. But if you haven't seen them, I highly recommend you do check them out. If you like horror, you like scares, you like cheap thrills, they're definitely worth checking out. So anyway, look, thank you very much for watching. We do have a new franchise coming out as of next week. And if you want to know what that is, well, that like button, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I do release a new review. Like I said, we do have another franchise coming out, and of course, Trashy Tuesdays. Lots of stuff going on there with some trashy alien films and some that I'm really keen to look into. So yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, look, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.